Hello and welcome to Mindset Mondays with DTK. This is episode number 170 in an ongoing series of live broadcasts designed for folk who have figured it out, folks who understand that the way to get better at doing what you do is to get better at being who you be, who you are at your core. That's the real work. Hey, so if you'll take just a moment and click share just beneath this video, the more folks we have that are involved in the conversation, the richer the conversation is, always. And so since we're live on YouTube, on LinkedIn, and on Facebook, please feel free to share this with any of your people on this platform. And if you're seeing this on demand, share it anyway. That's the opportunity for the conversation to continue during the week in between and leading up to each broadcast. God, I was having such a good time with this. That whole idea of, shh, hush your mouth, silence, be quiet, keep mum, clam up, button it up, button your lip, pipe down, zip it, put a sock in it, hold your tongue, shut your mouth, shut your maw, shut your yap trap or pie hole. We have an innumerable number of ways to say, be quiet. But it's amazing how rarely we actually do it. And that's the thing we're playing with today. Ram Dass says, the quieter you become, the more you can hear. The quieter you become, the more you can hear. And I'm struck by that. As I am with most of the quotes I use, yeah, I get it. During a coaching intensive earlier this month, it was a 9-day intensive, I got the gift of getting to lead a small group. And one of the exercises we gave our small groups was to pause, take a moment, breathe, get really quiet, and ask a question. In this exercise, we asked them, what was it that your heart craved? But to ask a question and then simply and silently listen. Now, this was a group of 8 folk from around the globe, and I was incredibly moved by what they came up with and what they shared and what surfaced for them. And then, of course, it was my turn, because leading the small group doesn't mean I'm not in it. And what surfaced for me when I got quiet and when I listened, what came up was about the work that I'd been avoiding for the better part of a year. You say I launched a book in September. All of you that come to these broadcasts know that. And I've kept myself so occupied with the work related to that project, that book, that thought leadership bucket, right? Promoting it, marketing it, all the podcast appearances, all the radio shows, all the episodes, all the guest webinars. I've got another one tomorrow afternoon. And the work that I've been avoiding is figuring out what my next way of speaking about my work is, what my next thought leadership arena is, what that bucket looks like. Yeah, Dave, I'm glad you're here, because you got to play with that question. And so for the last however many days it's been since that event, I spent time being quiet and listening and playing with what it is, not what it is that I want to talk about it, but how my thought leadership is going to show up. And doing it from this place is different. That the quieter I become, the more I actually get to hear. And what's powerful about that concept is the idea of being still and listening is that the clutter is gone. There's less of the mental chatter, less of the clutter, less of the saboteurs, the negative narratives in my head, less of wondering what other people are thinking or will think. Because when I get quiet and I get focused, when I lean into that edge, truly, yes, Parisa, being quiet and still is a huge edge for an Enneagram 7, because I want to listen to all of it. I want to take it all in, and I want to try to make it all fit and all work. And then that gets incredibly exhausting. What I noticed when I went back to do this book, to build Mindset Mondays, and going back through all the episodes for the first year, I was amazed by how many things I would try, how many ideas would get woven into one broadcast. And trying to take a broadcast and make it into a chapter was fascinating, because I had to untangle all the different ideas that I was lacing together, which was just a fraction of what was rolling through my head. And I had to get it down to one idea, one concept, one topic, one thread. And doing that with how I want to talk about my work, how I want to talk about mindset and leadership and moving towards fulfillment and focusing our efforts and our energies towards that. It was every bit about clearing all the external, all the exterior, all the clutter, all the things that aren't true, aren't real, aren't me, aren't core. And I realized that's not just about how I'm thinking about it. That's not just in my head. That's the work that I do. And that's the way I want to talk about it. It goes back to sort of the Michelangelo model, that idea of when he was asked how he carved such exquisite figures, he said, I don't. He said, I simply free them from the stone. What his work was as a sculptor, and what I enable my clients do through their coaching, is to chip away everything that isn't them, isn't true, isn't real, isn't who they be at their core, who they are. Because what's beautiful is from there, when the clutter is cleared away, when we get to live and love and lead from that clarity, that authenticity, that unclutteredness, that quiet, that's where life gets rich and full and magnificent. And the clarity that's come over the last several weeks just by being quiet, just by being silent and listening, has been stunning. And it has me excited to play with what's next. And so the question for you is, where do you create space for clarity in your world? Where do you create space in your world to silently listen? Where do you create the space in your world to silently listen? Well, first of all, are you? I think that's presupposed in the question. The quieter you become, the more you can hear. So where are you creating space for that? And better yet, presuming you are, what are you hearing? What's available for you in your silence? I'm constantly amazed by what's available for me when I just listen. Yet I just caught myself. There's part of me that's saying, boy, I wish I used to do that more. I wonder what else. And then I started to go down that rabbit hole of beating myself up for not having done it more. And Victoria, that really is a lot of that peace. The silence can be scary. I think that's what's kept me from stepping back. That's what's kept me from being still. Is how loud it can be and how scary it can be when we first get quiet. Right? When we first listen. When we first get still. And yet, there's brilliance in that silence. Just listening, just letting our own voice surface. And I go back to what Parisa said, stillness is an edge, not just for an Enneagram 7, but for so many of us, to actually hold still and listen. Because what we hear is the truth. When we're silent and we listen and we get past those negative voices, and we get past all the other voices that aren't true, aren't real, aren't us, aren't our sages, aren't those our better angels, our higher self, or whatever it is that you call it God, call it source, call it truth, call it the universe. When we're still and quiet long enough, we get to hear that, because the quieter you become, the more you can hear and the more you can distinguish the source. That's the exciting piece. I just got a vibration when I said that. That's the exciting piece. The longer you listen, the quieter you get, and the longer you listen, the more you can distinguish the source. So where do you create space in your world to silently listen? I think of Kevin. Kevin, you were just posting photos of when you were off the island and out in the water. And I know that for me growing up, the water was always a place for me to get quiet. And it wasn't just out on the lake or out in the ocean. It was in the shower too. But there are places that I spend time. I think part of what's been so frazzling about lockdown is I'm in a landlocked city. And I haven't had time on the water. And it's astounding how, God, there's a saying, and I never remember who said it, but there's nothing that salt water can't cure, be it tears or the ocean. And it's true, just being at and on the water makes such an immense difference for me. There's so much more quiet there for me. So much more there for me to hear, and the quieter I become, the more I can hear. And that's the other piece. Kevin, you said alone. There was a very long time in my world where I avoided being alone at all costs. I couldn't take the solitude because I went into that noisy, cluttered, awful part of my head with all the buildup of voices that weren't true, that weren't mine. But taking that invitation to be still and to know and to do it long enough to distinguish the source, that's going to stay with me today. And Dave, I know you've been doing a lot of your own focusing and being still and surfacing, letting what's important and what's true and what's known surface. And your writing about that, Dave, has been beautiful. So I think that's the invitation for this week. I always leave the invitation until it comes to me. That's the invitation for this week, is to create space in your world to get quiet and listen and do it long enough so that you can discern where it's coming from. Take the time to get past the noisy clutter. Invite the quiet and then listen. Enjoy your week. And I can't wait to hear what it is that surfaces for you. And as always, you're invited to come to the Facebook group to share, and you're also invited to message me, and I'd love to have more of a conversation about what's surfacing for you. This has been a fascinating journey for me these last couple of weeks as I've allowed more to surface. And I'm spending more time getting quiet so I can hear. And I invite you to do the same. Have a fantastic week, and I'll see you next Monday. Be well.